Hi there, I'm Jen Cassetta, your Chief Badassery Officer. If you're feeling drained, hesitant, stuck in self-doubt, or you just have a case of the vlogs, the Art of Badassery podcast is here to help you unleash your mojo once and for all. We'll provide you with tips, techniques, and real-life examples of how you can kick ass in all areas of your life. You'll learn how to flex your mental muscles, rise above fears, and turn setbacks into superpowers. So let's enter the dojo and let's get to work. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Art of Badassery podcast. I'm Jen Cassetta, your Chief Badassery Officer, and today I have such a special guest, Ali Shapiro. Hi, Ali. How are you?
Great, Jen. How are you?
Feeling awesome. And for those of you out there who don't know Ali Shapiro is a holistic nutritionist, integrative health coach, and rebel with a serious cause. I love that. She's the host of the top-ranked podcast, Insatiable, which I've had the honor of being a guest on. And her flagship program, Truce with Food, grew out of her 2-decade-long battle with food and healing as a teenage cancer survivor. Welcome, Ali, to the Art of Badassery. Wow. There are so many stories wrapped up in this short little bio of yours that I can't wait to dive into. So first, Ali, do you mind just walking us through your background, how you got to be this awesome holistic nutritionist, integrative health coach, and rebel with a serious cause?
Yeah. I think the best place to start is probably I was about 11 years old and I walked into a Weight Watchers in a suburban strip mall. Yeah. Yeah. And I wanted to lose weight. And that became really my foray into diet culture.
Okay, hang on. Quick question. You're 11. Obviously, someone had to take you to a Weight Watchers. Was it your parents' idea? Was it your
It was
idea?
my parent. It was, well, yes. Going to CCD was my idea. Going to Weight Watchers was my idea. There were a lot of ideas that I had as a kid that I was pretty persuasive.
Okay.
And again, my parents never talked to me about my weight had to change, but this was something that I wanted for myself. And you have a clinical nutrition background. I have a more, food as medicine background. What I didn't know at the time was I thought I was just eating too much, but about 5 or 6 years prior, I had been exposed to pesticides. And I was doing gymnastics on a friend's yard after their yard had been sprayed with Kenlon, which we know is Roundup. And I developed a horrible rash for 2 weeks. My parents took me to the doctors. Environmental toxicity was not on the radar in the 80s.
Right.
And when I look at pictures, it's like that's when I started to gain weight. So it was really an inflammatory issue, but I thought it was a caloric willpower discipline issue.
At 11 years old.
That's how much it's in the culture, I think. I think it's, you and I, we grew up in the 80s. I mean, it was like everything, the 80s and early 90s, it went from models being like somewhat like feminine to like heroin chic, looking like little boys, right?
Yeah. Coat hangers, my mother always would say.
Yeah. So
like
even
clothes hangers, where it was just like, that was literally what the fashion industry was showing us, was just like a skeleton with clothes on them. And this is what we should be aspiring to as little girls. Weird.
Yeah. It's so weird. And my parents didn't even let us watch Disney movies. I mean, I didn't know that we weren't allowed to watch Disney movies, but Disney just wasn't in our house because my parents were like, all the Disney roles, it's like the woman has to get saved, So I think
ahead of the curve there.
Yeah.
In the Shapiro household.
They even were like hippies and didn't get their yards sprayed. I mean, they were like public school teachers. I mean, I came from like a loving, wonderful family, and this stuff still infiltrates. And my dad also he was heavy as a kid. And so I would hear him every morning being like, he would run 5 or 6 miles and he'd be like, I'm running from the fat man. So even though it wasn't about me, as kids, we pick up this stuff implicitly, right?
Of course.
Just like, Of course, you know.
Of course.
And then when I was like in third grade, I remember the kid's name, his name was Ryan. I'm not going to out him with his last name. He called me fat on the bus. And
Mm,
at third grade, I still remember the shame being like, that's bad. That's bad.
mm,
You know, even though no one in my family cared about it or anything, it was this thing. So
okay.
yeah, so went to Weight Watchers, probably had some success. I can still remember the cards they used to give you. You would fold it and they would they would write your starting weight, and then every day, every week you'd go up and like get on the scale, and then they would write and you'd
Oh
get like a
God.
star. I know.
I'm sorry. I just have to say, how did they even allow 11-year-olds in the program with adults? Like it, none of that is okay.
Hashtag capitalism. I mean, it's like money, money, money. I
But
still remember eating the bars that they gave you that were like 2 points. It was like chocolate with crisp and ugh. I probably wouldn't even be able to stomach them, but at the time, I
uh-huh.
was like, I'm gonna be a good girl. I'm good at school. I can master this.
Right.
And turns out your body is not like a school project or right, getting good grades. And so I struggled with that. And then at the age of 13, I was trying to lose weight for the middle school dance. And my dad had a Nordic track, and I was trying to take my pulse in my neck. This is how much I knew about the body, and I found a lump. And my
Okay.
dad, he was a health and phys ed teacher. He was like, look, so he read a lot about this stuff. He's like, I've read that this could be Hodgkin's disease in young people. So he took me to the doctor, and the doctor was like, come back in 6 months. And my dad was like, no, my dad really advocated for me. He was like, no,
Right.
this needs to be taken seriously. Within 2 weeks, biopsy, cancer diagnosis of Hodgkin's disease, which is lymphatic cancer, inability to detox. And
Wow.
so, again, I think the pesticide exposure definitely contributed. It wasn't the only thing,
Hmm.
but it's probably why I got cancer so young. And so,
Wow.
when I was going through cancer and chemo, I actually became the thinnest I had ever been in my life,
Mm,
as a teenager. Except for my face was really puffy from steroids, but once that puffiness went down, it's like I could fit into all the clothes that my friends. I had great friends, and they were all thin. And I mean, do you remember Contempo casuals and like Wet
yes.
Seal? And I was like, I can wear a belt.
Jordache jeans. Jordache jeans.
DoorDash jeans. Oh my God, I love DoorDash jeans. Yes. All of those things fit really well. And I got attention, and people were like, you look great. And it was this really, I didn't have language for this at the time, but it was this really confusing thing that I would eventually have to decouple that growing up in the 80s and 90s, and probably still today, although it's changing, you think the value of health is defined by thinness.
Mm,
So I was at the thinnest I ever was because I almost died.
right.
And now I'm getting all of this attention, which is great. And I feel this pressure to maintain thinness because I think that means I'm going to stay healthy.
Mm,
And so it was a lot of this I see it being so polarized today, right? About weight. Like, oh my God, it's weight loss is bad, it's good. And it's like, it
right.
depends. Like for me, my weight was inflammatory driven. Like I should have been like, I didn't need Weight Watchers. I needed to like, figure out why I couldn't detox, right?
Right.
Like that was a different situation. So my in high school, my friends and I, we would joke diet starts tomorrow, and I
Mhm.
would run just like my dad did every morning. And I could outrun my ice cream and whenever we would like eat a lot. And
Mhm.
so I was able to maintain that weight loss, and be relatively thin. And then I went to college and undergrad, and transitions can be a time where people really start to eat a lot and turn to food to ground them. And I couldn't wait to get out of my town. I was so excited. This was not something that I was nervous about, but just the uncertainty of like, oh my God, like, I went to Penn State undergrad. There's 40,000 people here. Like,
Wow.
I'm on my own. I have to find new friends. And I had a great, wonderful group of friends in high school. And my emotional eating started to turn into more frequently. I
Hmm.
became more obsessed with my weight because I was gaining back the weight that I had lost. I couldn't out exercise it.
Right.
And then on top of this, I really felt depressed. I had bad acne. I had tried antibiotics, Accutane, none of that worked. And then
Mm-hmm.
as I graduated, I got a job, and my first manager and I did not get along. And it was the first time in an area where I felt really confident, which was school and work, that I was struggling. And so I got diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome, and they did a colonoscopy because of my cancer history. I mean, it was a really cute doctor, and I was like, no, this is not happening to me. But it happened. You will survive, everyone, if you get a
Yeah.
fucking colonoscopy, doctor. But they didn't find anything. So fast forward to like 20, being 26 years old, and I'm just struggling with more and more diagnoses. And I
Right.
found the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. Did you go there too?
I did in
That's right.
2005. Hmm.
Okay, I went in 2006, so right before you, which
Wow.
was,
Right after
yes,
the next
right
year.
after. And you know that that period was so different. And I just say that because I found functional medicine there, but it wasn't what it is now today.
Hmm.
And so even in finding that, I felt kind of alone in it because I was telling my doctors, I was like, oh, I basically connected all of this stuff to gut health
Hmm.
that was related to my chemotherapy. And
Hmm.
I was dismissed by a lot of doctors. I finally found a great integrative doctor who she's like, you teach me so much. And I was like, well, I'm learning from you. But I basically, through understanding that these symptoms weren't diagnoses for me, everyone's different, but they were actually symptoms. And I was able to reverse them by just getting off processed foods at the time and gluten. And
Wow.
I didn't have to take a ton of supplements. There was no testing back then. It was really bare bones.
Yeah.
And what was happening to me, and I didn't have language, but my relationship with food started to get better because
Mhm.
all of a sudden, rather than looking at food only as about calories, I was like,
Mhm.
oh, food can be medicine too. And
Wow.
I want to feel good. I want to feel some agency in my health.
Mhm.
So I felt like I had found, the fountain of youth.
Mhm.
But then what I would find is during stressful periods, I would start binging or eating again. So,
Mm.
for example, in the cancer world, we call it scanxiety season. So, because I had radiation as well, they're really not worried about me getting Hodgkin's anymore, but they're worried about breast and thyroid cancer.
Okay.
And because our medical system is not designed with the user experience in mind,
Right.
from the time you schedule your scans to the time you get them to the time you meet with your oncologist can be 6 weeks. And I would be binging on sugar the
Oh,
entire time. And
yeah.
I was like, I now know what sugar and cancer, the relationship, and how it
Right.
accelerates tumor growth. Why am I doing all of this?
Yeah. But say that like again, like sugar feeds cancer, and
Yes,
you're waiting for your scans to make sure you're cancer free, and you're binging on basically cancer food.
yes.
Yeah.
And and I felt even more frustrated because I know now. Right before I was like, oh no, I'm at the mercy of just the cancer gods, right? And now it's like, oh no, I know that there's some things I can do to reduce my risk, right? I'm
Right.
not one of these people that think like a diet can prevent cancer completely, right? There's so many factors to it.
Yeah. And I mean, I've shared this on the podcast in little bits, but my father essentially was like the healthiest eater, the meditator, the martial artist, the fitness, like so healthy, and also got cancer. So yeah, I no longer believe you can prevent everything through lifestyle and diet and all of those things, but you can mitigate.
Yes, yes, yes. We talked about holding the and if you go into cancer treatments healthier, you might tolerate them more. Like there's a
Right.
lot more, there's a lot of value in
Yeah.
still being healthy, even if you can't,
Yeah.
control the
Stronger,
outcome.
stronger to be, yeah, to get through chemo. Good point. I mean,
Yes, yes. In
hard
fact,
on the
they've done,
body.
yeah, they've done fascinating studies that people who have better gut health actually respond to chemo better.
Mm,
And they found gut health being better about having a variety of foods, not
yeah.
just they compared it to a probiotic versus doing that. So that's a whole other that's a whole other show.
Whole
Um,
other show.
so I took, and at the same time, I was seeing clients on the side. And again, because it was a different era, I was just doing grocery store tours. I was getting people off. This was before anyone could pronounce quinoa. No
Yeah.
one, it was like, quinoa.
Quinoa.
Yes, yes, it was a different era. And because we didn't have social media and all this media around body positivity, and we didn't even have the words diet culture yet, I thought I was the only one with this crazy relationship to food. But as I started working with clients in tandem, after about the fourth session, we'd stop talking about food. And
Mm,
there were these shifts that were happening, and I didn't know what was working, what wasn't working. And I took this same, we could call it a functional medicine, we could call it holistic systems in academia, but I was like, us falling off track or not being able to keep up feeling good, I no longer believe this is a willpower and discipline problem. Like, what if this is the symptom, just like my IBS and depression and acne was? Like, what if there's other root causes? And so that's when I went back to grad school and realized that we actually turn to food when we feel unsafe.
Mm,
By unsafe, I mean, yes, physically unsafe if you're not getting the physical nutrients that you need. Not necessarily your type of physical safety that you're so brilliant at helping people with.
thank you.
But as adults, safety is really about belonging.
Mm,
So, do I feel like I belong here? And the way that's kind of a more academic wisdom term, but how it shows up for clients and everyday people is, when do I feel separate? When do
mm,
I feel like, why isn't this happening for me? Right?
right, right.
Whether it's our businesses, whether it's a relationship, whether it's finances, it's like something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
And we may not think something's wrong with me, but we may feel just like, and it comes out as our food choices, right? I have some clients right now and they go out and it's like, I don't want to be the high maintenance one by being like, I'm ordering this, or I don't like this vegetable, right? Um, but it
My
also,
husband still makes fun of me, sorry. Every time I order fish at a restaurant, I have to ask, like, is it wild caught? I just don't eat farm raised seafood. Sidebar, that's my own thing. But he's always like, do you have to ask the name of the fish and like all of these things
who were
before?
its parents? Did it have a good life?
Yeah, exactly. Oh gosh.
So
But I
that
don't
is,
care about being high maintenance. That's the difference.
yeah. Well, and part of the work is like, is that high maintenance or you're discerning? And
Right,
there's a reason why you don't want to eat farm fish,
right.
right?
Yep.
So this is about
Separate
really,
podcast.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Are you being a burden or is it the fact that you have needs
Yeah.
and everyone has needs? So
Mhm.
the work is really changing the meaning of what it feels like to the
Advocate for yourself.
yes, yes, yes. So I found that basically we have these stories, we can call them beliefs for purposes that people understand. We have these beliefs that make us feel isolated and separate. And then we don't bring certain parts of ourselves to the conversation. We don't bring certain parts of ourselves to our work, certain parts of ourselves to the thing we're struggling with. And
Mm,
we need those parts to actually succeed. And when we're stressed, feeling isolated or separate, we then turn to food because food stimulates attachment chemicals. Because from
mm.
the time that we are
Like
born,
oxytocin?
yeah, yes. It won't give us, and this is Dr. Deborah McNamara's work in her book Nourished, she's a child developmental psychologist. She talks about food will stimulate attachment chemicals, but it won't give us the deeper belonging, the sense that like, oh my God, someone's here to help me. Someone's got
Mm,
my back. Um, and that's a bigger risk that we have to take, and that's actually what we really want most deeply. But food almost does the job. So Dr. McNamara's mentor, Dr. Gordon Newfield, he has this quote that I love. He says, "There's nothing quite as addicting as something that almost works."
mm.
And it's like food
Ouch.
almost fucking works.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Almost.
Almost, right?
Almost.
So
Hmm.
if we look at like in hindsight now, right, with my scan anxiety season, what eventually got me to stop binging was not a bigger plan to not have sugar in the house, not more rules and like regulation. It was, what do I need? And I had a really big story around, sometimes I still get emotional, my cancer being such a burden to my
Mm,
family, to just everyone around me. And so when I would be heading, like preparing for these scans, my parents would call and be like, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm fine. I'm fine. And I always felt this like need to protect them. And so I had to start saying, I'm scared. These are really hard.
yeah.
And they were like, oh, we wish we could be there with you. I could like cry. My parents are wonderful. And it
Mm,
was like sharing that was like, oh, I'm I have the support I need right here.
mm.
I
Oh,
now,
I just have to jump in. Sorry.
please interrupt me. I can go on.
Well, this
I have
is
a podcast, Jen. I can go on.
I know you do. Yellow belt level in the Art of Badassery talks about bouncing back and different options on how to do it. And one of those is really rolling with the punches. And in order to have the people show up in your life and support you, you have to ask for it, and ask for it just by sharing and being vulnerable. And this is why I choose guests to come on this show, because of your vulnerability, because of your sharing. That's so important, because when we hold everything in, when we don't talk about our problems at all, right? How can we expect for the right solutions to show up, the right people, the right ideas, the right camaraderie, the right feeling of belonging? So your story just gave it a whole other meaning right now for me. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing, that as adults, when we're young, we really are attuned to our attachment figures, our peers, our teachers, because we're learning what's good, what's bad, right? Like, what do I do that gets me acceptance and what doesn't? And that's not a bad thing. That's just part development. And you want to come into an adulthood with some sort of moral code. You don't just want to be like, nothing matters. But as adults, the maturity, the evolution that has to happen is we have to say, wait, let me belong to myself first. And I call it having your own back, right? Like, what do I actually need so then I can ask for it, instead of like expecting other people just to know. Because right, like if I tell my parents I'm fine, or I like my now husband, boyfriend, I'd be like, will you come to the, or my sister lived in Philadelphia at the time, or she still does, but we lived in Philly. Like, will you come to the appointments with me? Will you sit in with the oncologist? Because I get so nervous before he comes in. I can't remember what I want to ask, what I want to say. And they were like, we would love to. This is hard. And I had my own judgments of like, I should fucking be over this by now. Like, it happened 10 years ago. Yeah. But I wasn't over it, because the body keeps the score, as Vander Cook says, and it's like, until I processed all of that, it's like I was still going to be reenacting certain patterns out. So that's really what Truce with Food is about, is ending the battle, but it's actually not a battle with food. It's the inner battle of our beliefs that make us feel separate and that we can't have the belonging we need.
Oof, okay. So many questions, so many thoughts. In case you're listening and you don't know my background, but I'm a clinical nutritionist, health coach from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And for the last, I would say 5-ish years, I've kind of done my best to not do health coaching and not do clinical nutritionist work. And there's many reasons. I'm actually probably going to do a whole podcast on that, like why I quit being a nutritionist. But it's because I got pegged into this weight loss expert thing, and people kept coming to me. And when they came to me for weight loss, it's like they just want a plan. They want someone to tell them what to eat, how to exercise, what to do. And so I would provide that, right? Because it's like, sure, here you go. And nowadays, I mean, you could just ask ChatGPT, you could just go online, you can go on YouTube. There's so much information out there. But when they didn't get the results because they really weren't doing the work, I would start to blame myself and say like, oh, I must not be very good at this. Anyway, that went on until I actually realized, no, there's so much more to food and our relationships with food. I fortunately have, I think, a pretty good relationship with food. And I didn't, was I taught that? I don't think I was consciously taught that. I just was modeled that, right? Watching my parents. My mom, not so much. She had like the candy hidden, hidden away. And to be honest, my dad was so strict and disciplined with food in the house. So maybe it was, nothing's perfect, but at least I grew up with a love of food. I love food. I love healthy foods. I don't enjoy ultra processed foods. They don't taste good to me. So I feel very fortunate in that. And I wasn't able to counsel people in the way that I can now with the mindset work and the other modalities that I've brought into my coaching. Long story for that. But essentially, I also got sick of this diet culture thing, toxic diet culture conversation. Can we talk a little bit about that? And I love in a post you had on Instagram, I think it was this morning, how we can adopt this and thought process. I call it living in an and life. I can do this and I can do that. I can feel this while I still can do this. For you, let's break it down.
Yeah. So do you want me to use weight loss as an example?
Yeah,
Okay.
talk about this.
Yeah. So I think what ends up and this is more like practitioner lens maybe, but when we come out of when we all kind of I say come off the conveyor belt in our 20s, right? When we're ready to like enter adulthood,
Yeah.
we're all in what's called the socialized mind. And the socialized mind is, okay, I've accumulated all these experiences the first 20 years of what makes me good, what makes me bad. And now I'm going to try to make my way out in the world, right? But what we think is we think those ideas of good and bad are absolute. Oh my God. Thinness is the best, fatness is the worst, right? And so what ends up happening is you get in the all or nothing, black or white mindset when you're in the socialized mind. And so with weight loss, and there is, because for so long we only had diet culture, which is very toxic. And diet culture, everyone defines it differently, but the way that I think the two beliefs that I think most people can agree on is that diet culture is about thin at any cost. So it doesn't matter how you lose weight, it just thin at any cost.
Right.
And
So
then
it could be, pills, extreme, all the things that we see, these crazy diets, all that stuff.
yes, cabbage soup. I mean, you name it, I've tried it. All of these things. And your weight determines your worth. So thin
Yep.
people are hardworking and successful, all that stuff. So when you're in the socialized mind, even you're going to go to the other extreme. So you're going to say, okay, weight loss, diet culture is bad, right?
Right.
Your weight should not be about your worth, and we should not be thin at any cost. Totally agree with that.
Right.
And the problem is you're against diet culture. What are you for? Right? I'm anti-diet culture. Okay, but what are we for? Right? And so holding the and is about maybe sometimes, and if we look in this, I think also the belief that ties both of these together is that weight loss damages your relationship with yourself because of what you have to put your body through, right? And that your if your worth is tied up in your weight, that is very damaging. I know I lived it for 18 years. It is not a healthy place to be. And so that belief or story is kind of what connects that binary all or nothing mind, right? And what ends up happening is what also connects those are our values. So how it comes out is, well, I value health. Okay, well, you've been socialized to believe health is only about thinness, right? That's what I was taught. So I only look at food as about calories, right? I don't understand what else it might be. So part of holding the and is saying, what else could health be? Could health be sleeping well?
Yeah.
Could health be amazing relationships?
Yep.
Could health be food as medicine? Could health be movement that helps energy that helps me sleep? I'm sorry, I'm menopausal, so sleep is like everything. Does it come back to sleep? Does it come back to sleep?
Yeah.
So holding the and is saying, okay, so this value of health has always been only about weight loss and thinness. And what else is it about? And Truce with Food is about, look, some of my clients want to lose weight, some don't. But the belief system is, how can weight loss improve your relationship with yourself? Because sometimes people are metabolically unhealthy. They are exhausted, and they didn't gain weight because of lack of discipline. They gain weight because they're inflamed, and they're going down a cycle that is not going to be great. And caring for them is not denying that sugar is not their best friend right now.
Right.
Does it mean
sugar is inflammatory?
It is inflammatory. Again, emotionally, that does not mean anything about you. If you're turning to sugar, it probably makes a lot of sense in the Truce with Food model, because you're probably feeling stressed, and it's so natural. It makes so much sense to turn to that. And can we separate the biological reality of how the body works?
Right.
Which I didn't make up the rules. I used to love sugar. I get how addictive it can be.
Yeah.
And so holding the and is starting to expand the value, in this case, of health.
Yeah.
And saying, if I really want to repair my relationship with myself, whether I want to lose weight or not,
Mhm.
What else do I need to learn? How else can I view food and movement? Like you said, energy. I had a client in my Truce with Food class who was like, I keep saying I want to move. I keep saying I want to move. And I'm like, but the belief system that you're operating under right now, if you only have been taught that health is about weight loss, you think it doesn't count to
Mm.
go take a walk after lunch, right? Like we all hear, like, do exercise snacks. Why isn't anyone doing them? Well, in their mind, the meaning matrix is, well, it doesn't count. And it doesn't count because we're counting it as weight loss. So for my clients who are really ambitious and like,
Mm.
let's connect your movement to, do you feel more creative? Do you
Mhm.
feel restored so that you actually, this rest is an important part of productivity?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I want to do that because I want to be a badass in my career. And
Yeah.
so the work is to decouple
Hmm.
food and exercise and all these health habits from weight loss and connect them to how they benefit you immediately. Now, if they benefit you immediately, you're going to be consistent. It's a snowball rolling down the hill because ultimately, both this idea of restriction is what we think is good. And you
Mm.
have to really learn and live that, oh, I don't have to restrict
Right.
to be healthy. I
Hmm.
actually have to feel really satisfied
Hmm.
and satiated physically, emotionally, spiritually. So, does that
Oh, yes, yes, yes. This is so good. And it's exactly what now with my Burnout to Badass program and keynote, right? I see it in people's faces. I could see it in real time when I'm sharing almost that one of the exact sentences you've said. I don't use the word uncouple, but when we stop just, when we think of food and nutrition, it's always been about weight loss. It's always been about calories. And I've always known that that's garbage. But now it's like, what if we just looked at it as our energy, right? And our fuel and making choices based on our energy levels, and then, if you go further, obviously, then it's about leptin and ghrelin levels and balancing your hormones and blood sugar levels and going for those walks after big meals to help move and all of it. So thank you for sharing that in a different way.
Yeah, I do want to say one thing though that you said, because
Yeah.
I think where people sometimes are like, yeah, yeah, but calories do matter. If you want to lose weight, and the way that I think the best way to describe it is that calories are like they're like, if you want to lose weight, they do matter, but they're like 10% of the equation. What
Hmm.
you have to look at is, and expanding your health value will show you the how.
Yeah.
Okay, I need to be, and most people don't even realize they should not be in such a great calorie deficit that they are, like if they're already stressed and not giving themselves the right nutrition.
Right.
But I think this is where we sometimes lose people in the body positivity and spaces. And I know calories matter, but we're like,
Mhm.
calories don't matter, but they do. But we're trying to, in as we develop and have more what they call psychological flexibility, is it's like we include and transcend. So it's like,
Hmm.
okay, so calories may matter, and there's 90% of what I don't know about metabolism, hormones, sleep,
Right.
stress, that is the how.
Yeah.
That's what I need to learn, is how do I actually get to a caloric deficit that works for me and works for my body, that isn't so challenging, that isn't so
Mm.
full of restriction and deprivation. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to add that because I think that's
Yeah.
why sometimes all of us who know that we don't want people to care, like we don't want them to care about their weight in terms of worthiness, right? Like
Right.
we're so passionate about that. And it's like, but people have the real lived experience of, but when I cut calories, it does work, right? In
Mm.
the short term, at least if you're doing it drastically. But
Sure. And there's the whole, I think even more important, I've never counted my calories in my life. Never.
yeah,
Just never. I think
what have
looking
you?
at
But
food,
have you ever struggled with your weight?
I mean, in the way of, I'm 5 pounds heavier than I should be, that kind of thing, and should being where I feel comfortable.
Yeah,
Um, but I can then look to the past 6 months and be like, oh, I could see where, my lifestyle, led to this,
yeah,
and then just kind of readjust. But I never did it in a way where I was counting or going on diets or off diets or things like that. So I was always very active. My martial arts was a huge part of my, 20s and 30s. And I still am active, not in that way, not even close to how much I used to move per day. But for me, it's quality versus quantity. So if I'm eating all or, mostly whole foods that are not processed, don't come in packages, that kind of thing, then I feel like I don't really need to count. I could just be more in touch with my body and am I feeling satiated? Am I feeling full? And stopping when I feel full. And when I'm stressed is when I don't stop. I just keep going, right? So for
Yeah.
me, it is the stress thing and really getting present and more mindful about, do I need this second trip to the kitchen to get more food? Or am I just stressed and going too fast and not feeling in my body? So that's another thing I like to just share is, you know, when we're really, really in touch with our bodies, you're just more in tune with the choices you're making of how you fuel yourself versus if you're just in your head, stressed on the go, on the go, on the go, and you're like eating on the run and doing all these things, like you can't be in touch with your body.
Yeah.
Make
What I
sense?
also think, yeah, and what you're describing is like I think the ideal how people want to get to, and I think you had a lot of self-trust because you were tying nutrition to how do I perform at martial arts and I care about this.
Mm-hmm.
But and I think those
And
and
nowadays, without martial arts, it's just like my life and my energy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And though you've still like because I think what happens for those of us who've like struggled with our weight and been called out about it
Yeah.
is that often based on what we think is good and bad, what we've been
Hmm.
told, whether it's be vegetarian, don't eat carbs, on based on what we learned earlier on in our life, often when we're in our body, what we feel is shame. We don't feel the trust that you have. I mean,
Mm,
I have what you have now, but it took me being like, wait a second, is this and shame in the nervous system feels like freeze, right?
mhm.
So it feels like numbness. And then sometimes we're eating to regulate the numbness, but that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
But
No, but this is so perfect because this is actually summing up the whole truce with food is
yes,
getting to that truce, trust.
yes. I love
Um,
that. Yes, because that's ultimately what the process is about is learning to trust ourselves, to experiment so
mhm.
that we can come back into our body and it doesn't just feel like guilt and shame. And
And
yeah,
having to check this box or track these
right,
calories
right.
or
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Yes, yes.
I love this so much. In like just a couple bullet points, or could you just give us a couple quick takeaways from the Truce with Food or
Yes,
how
yes.
you move people through it?
Yeah, so I think the first question for everyone to listen to and what we spend is really this mindset shift of why does this make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because when we are falling off, next time you fall off track or you're stressed, right? You talk about like, oh my God, the last few months in work. And rather than being like, oh my God, why am I doing this? Why does this make sense? Because what that does is it starts to repair your relationship with yourself. Because, and this is another big thing in the whole weight loss conversation and why people are so anti-diet, which I get it, is there's so much shame. And when you are in shame, you can't actually hear what you need to hear. And I'll give you an example. Like my husband works with me, right? And he's an amazing writer and storyteller. And when he gives me feedback, it sounds like fucking criticism, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, and I'm like, but I know my pattern now. I'm like, I will come back to you tomorrow. Right now, this feels really like I just want to be like, no, no, no. You know what I mean? But the next day, I'm like, he's fucking right, man. You know,
Yeah.
like, so when it comes to food stuff, right? When you're still coming out of, oh my God, this shame, this should have never been put on me. I get it. But we want to start saying, why does this make sense? Because that says, wait a second, I can trust that why I'm doing this makes sense at the level of awareness I have. Because
Okay.
food is
So
about attachment. Yes. Why does this make sense?
why does this make sense? Number one.
Yes. Then the second question is you want to say, and this is where food noise is a really popular term. You want to get that food noise is not, if unless your like blood sugar's crashing, if it's about stress eating, you want to say what feels unsettling right now, what feels at risk, what feels
Mm,
hard. Those are the same questions to get at where do I feel like I may be separate and what I'm doing is wrong?
Mm-hmm.
So like if you're working really hard, right, and you're at your business and then you're like, oh, I need that second. It's like, what feels at risk right now? Oh, is this
Mm-hmm.
gonna make me money? Is this person gonna say yes? Am I gonna be rejected? And so you
Mm-hmm.
start to get clear on the story or the belief that you're really afraid is gonna happen right now.
Wow.
And
Love that.
so, yeah, so those are some, and
What's at risk?
yeah, and so what we do when we're in the socialized mind is we orient away towards risk. We say, I don't want that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I used to define health as like, I don't have cancer. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh my God, amazing place to be. So grateful. I will be forever grateful for the researchers of Western medicine. And though, that really narrowed my lens of what was possible, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I still had IBS, depression, Accutane, or acne. And so you want to reorient towards what do I need to support myself here?
Right.
And like take the risk to get your needs met, whether it's if you can do it yourself, right? Like if it's, for example, like often people, my clients being exhausted will trigger, right? Eating because it gives you the
Yeah.
energy to power through. It gives you dopamine, all these things that you're depleted on when you're, when you're burnt out, you need more intensity to feel things. And so you're reorienting towards what do I need?
Mm-hmm.
I may need to rest right now. Like I may need to go out and take a walk
Mm-hmm.
and not push harder. And that's actually what I need.
Mm-hmm.
And starting small there. Yeah. So
Yeah.
those are like the three questions that can,
Well, I love that. And my three things that I go to, my little menu, and that's what I have clients do, like come up with a menu of things that you can choose from when you're in that place. Do I want a cup of tea? Do I want to go for a walk?
yes,
Do I need to lift weights to feel strong in my body? Or do I need a nap? And I
yes,
like go through those things and choose one of them. And
yeah.
sure enough, on the other side of that, I feel better.
Yes. And one thing I want to say to people, because you brought up the sustainability part, is that part of why sustainability, and it is like known in the health and wellness world that like sustainability is this black box, right? Like, like it's your trainers know it. Like, talk to any trainer, they'll be like, yeah, no one's consistent. Talk to any nutritionist. No, no. But part of what we need to do for sustainability is get to the core need because it offers flexibility.
Mm,
So, for example, if someone's tired, right, knowing that you need rest, right, and there's 7 different types of rest, it's like, what is accessible right now, right? Like maybe I'm at work and I
right.
cannot go, like one of my
Take a nap.
clients, yeah, I cannot take a nap. But I know that I need to, I love that you said movement. Movement is an amazing way. There's physical rest is one of the 7 types of rest. So if people can get clear on, that's why I always focus on the need, is you get a lot more flexibility in
Hmm.
what is accessible in the moment rather than
Hmm.
thinking it has to be, following a strict plan.
Right. Right. Which is why the plans don't usually work.
Yeah. And that's why
Okay.
I love that you offer the menu because that's what you need choices.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So everyone listening, I hope you have some great takeaways from this conversation. I know I do. I learned a lot just like listening and then reflecting again over, from both a practitioner and just a woman going through this. Um, Going through it all with you. So, Ali, I just want to thank you so much. I know we didn't get to even cover, you're going to have to come back because we want to talk about
Okay.
perimenopause, we want to talk about
Oh,
menopause, all of the things.
yes.
But at first, I have 4 rapid fire questions that I like to ask every guest. Are you ready?
I'm ready, but can I be brief? Okay, I'll be brief.
Rapid fire, ready? And the
Okay.
first is, what's your childhood food?
Oh my God. Pizza Hut pizza. We used to go there every other Friday when my parents got paid. Yeah.
Ooh,
Pizza Hut pizza. And they later
okay.
came out with a dessert buffet, which is
Ugh.
like dessert pizza, which was amazing at the time.
Yeah, gross. Sorry.
Yeah.
That was food
No, I
shame.
couldn't eat them now. I couldn't eat it now, but I loved it at the time.
Yeah, of course, of course. All these answers are usually like that. Second question is, if you could have a drink with anyone, alive or dead, who would it be and what would you drink with them?
Oh my God. What actually comes to mind is Mary
Mhm.
Magdalene.
Ooh.
Because I think she's like the feminine part of religion that we're missing.
Oh, wow.
And I would definitely, given that she lived in like the Middle East, I
Mhm.
would, I hope we would have like really good water to drink.
Water.
Yeah, I don't drink. I've just never been a drinker. I always save
Also,
my calories for food. That's why.
yes. Okay. Third question, favorite self-help book?
Oh man. The first thing that comes to mind is Women Who Run with the Wolves by Dr. Clarissa Estes. Have you read that?
I have it. I started it. I haven't finished. So this is my sign.
Yeah.
Women Who Run with Wolves. Amazing. And
With the Wolves, yeah.
then last but not least, what's your favorite hype song?
Oh, my favorite hype song. Oh, I love that song, I Did It All. I don't even know who it's by. It's like, oh my God, I have the worst thing. I did it all. It's basically, I realized like the core value I have in life is that I need to know I went for it. Like
Uh-huh.
ultimately, the older I get, it's like, I just want to know I fucking tried and I went for it. And that song to me captures like, I lived it all. Like,
Wow.
so yeah.
Okay, we're gonna look it up because I love that ending on that note, right? We're all doing our best out here. So thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing your beautiful wisdom with everyone. Everyone out there, if you have any questions, comments, please leave them on either Ali's Instagram, my Instagram at Jen Cassetta. Ali, tell everyone where we can find you.
Yes, yes. So I'm on Instagram. I'm at Ali M Shapiro. So ALIM as in Mary, Mary Magdalene. Shapiro, SHAPIRO. And then I have my Insatiable podcast. And then in the fall, I have a program called Why Am I Eating This Now that works on stress eating. And so people can go to alishapiro.com/ Why Am I Eating This Now group program. I think if you Google that, it'll come up. And get on the wait list for that.
Awesome. Can't wait to see that. Also, there's Truce with Food that I know Ali runs throughout the year. So make sure you get on her email list. We'll have
Yes.
all those links in the show notes. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Make sure you subscribe and rate and leave a review if this podcast speaks to you. Thank you so much for listening. I love you.